Welcome, Wargamers, to the short and stout perspective of the mortal realms, because today we are continuing our chat about all things Duardin. Specifically, the Duardin that are featured in the Cities of Sigmar faction. When the armies from Warhammer Fantasy Battles moved to Age of Sigmar, dwarves were really reduced and fractured in a lot of different ways. You of course have the Fire Slayers, the Sons of Grimnir and Fire and Flame, the Carrigan Overlords, who are kind of like the prodigal sons, if you will, of Grugni. And then there's that third pillar of Dwarven heritage, something that harkens back to the old world, when they were known as dwarves, of course, and their evolution went in a completely different direction than their cousins, taking on their own name of the Dispossessed. Somehow they found a balance between the isolationist technocrats and the patriarchal gold fetishists. How they did it, we're going to explore today, but the Dispossessed really are a sub-faction, or I guess kind of a flavor, not even really a sub-faction, of the Cities of Sigmar book. So I got that battle tome recently, thank you GW for sending it, and it's been wonderful to see how they've kind of recreated the cities to let you kind of tell whatever story you want. So I wanted to pull apart that, how do the Dispossessed fit into the Dawnbringer Crusades and so on, and we're going to go into that right after a quick word from this week's sponsor. Plunder dwarven holds. Fight through hordes of foes while your torchlight slowly is consumed by darkness, with nothing to calm you but your flask of weapons-grade ale. This week's videos are sponsored by Torch and Shield, created by Grimscald Games. It is now on Kickstarter, and if you love dwarves in any context, you will love this game. Torch and Shield is a dungeon diving skirmish game that sees various dwarven clans going into long abandoned depths of their ancient ancestral holds to plunder wealth, weapons, technology, and forbidden lore. You play as the head of one such expedition, and along your journey to riches and glory, you'll need to survive and outwit other dwarves, as well as the many horrors that have made their homes in the caverns below. If you are looking for a fantastic skirmish game that is very lightweight, you can use whatever miniatures you want and terrain you want, please take a second, go check out this game because it is really cool. Thank you for your time. Now back to your regularly scheduled Dwarven content. Now, for those of you who are new to Age of Sigmar or the faction, the Cities of Sigmar as a whole represent the overwhelming masses of regular mortals just trying to survive the AOS setting. I won't go into too much, I have a whole playlist about Cities of Sigmar, but one of the defining features of this faction is that it takes the best skills, and just the populations, frankly, of multiple fantasy factions, races, however you want to use the word, and distills them into a single fighting power. So we have humans, dwarves, elves, all working together. But I will say up front that there's a lot more going on here than like teamwork making the dream work. Because one thing I highlighted as I talked about the other Duardin faction, the Carrigan Overlords and the Fire Slayers, is they all really exemplify how this species reacted to the Age of Chaos. And they did so in a way that no other army did. Like, the inciting event was the Age of Chaos, and they had such clear and distinct responses that all of them took Dwarven society and branched out in very interesting ways. The Fire Slayers dug deep into their magma holds, or they bartered their service to progressively more dubious employers to avoid their own destruction. The Carrigan Overlords just took off to the skies. They were like, nope! And they only returned when they felt comfortable about their technological superiority and that they could make money from it. And so with all of that being said, who are the Dispossessed, right? Who are these Duardin, and how are they different? Well, to start, we're going to hop in the way back machine to the tail end of the Age of Myth, when that sundering happened, right? We have to follow which direction they took from that moment. So the Age of Chaos is just about to fall, and looking around, things are already falling apart. Right? Chaos has infiltrated most of the mortal realms somehow. Entire warbands and waves of demons are rushing across pretty much every single continent that's known, and every king and noble and commander, or even heck, town mayors, had to make a choice on what to do. And this includes all of those early Dwarven Hold kings. You have to remember that those early dwarves, I'm going to call them dwarves, because in the Age of Myth, where they were found by Sigmar, they really were meant to resemble the old world fantasy battle dwarves. He set them up in the realm of metal, and when Grugni was reunited with them, he basically poured old dwarven culture back into his people. Massive subterranean, cavern fortress cities, mining, craftsmanship, architecture, basically everything went to their high watermark. It's as if the dwarves of fantasy battles were just allowed to just keep growing with their technology and information ad infinitum. However, dwarves are stubborn. And when chaos first entered into the realms, the real gravity of the situation didn't quite settle in. And many of these, I'm going to call them the OG holds, they tried to wait it out. Surely we can resist this. We've had other, primitive warbands of different tribes that weren't conquered by Sigmar quite yet, but not Chaosy. They've come against us and we repelled them. We could do this. Until they started getting destroyed one by one with startling regularity. Because the horrors of the Age of Chaos dumped everything everywhere all the time. You had Skaven mining in underground, Nurgle was poisoning the earth from above so it would seep down into their holds. Right, all the things we've talked about during the Age of Chaos on this channel, not to mention, there's destruction armies running around. This is actually when the Ironjaws are born because they're made from normal orcs that just punched enough Chaos warriors to get big, and strong. So all those things are developing at the same time. Now, because of these holds falling, we know that those are not the ones we're chatting about today. Those people got wiped out to a dwarf. And when Sigmar gave the warning that he was going to close the gates of Azyr, you had better be on this side of the door. Every single hold king who heard this had a tough choice to make. You could stay and fight for the life that you want and likely die trying, or you could flee. And you could leave your heritage and your ancestral land and the riches that you have worked hard for to an unknown hope that may be nothing. You'll never see it again. Also, you don't know if you're going to make it to Azyr. You just need to start running. Because there are multiple stories of people who were trying to get to the doors and the door slammed shut right in front of them. They were just a little bit too late. And for a people as tradition-bound as the dwarves, like I said, we're talking about them sort of in a roughly fantasy battles context, this is an impossible choice, because most of them stayed and died. A few fled, because this was an immediate adapt or die moment. And the ones who left, these Duardin, adapted by rolling the dice in Azyr. But it creates a very interesting situation, because now you have this entire people group, right, the Duardin from all over the different realms. All of them descend on Azyr as fast as they can. But all of these cultures deeply value their homes and land, but they don't have any. And there were likely, dwarven clans and holds and stuff in Azyr, but this would still be a refugee crisis, even if it was just limited to dwarves. They can't just take them in and assimilate. And speaking about Cities of Sigmar more broadly, I have a whole dedicated video series about Cities of Sigmar you can go watch. But once those doors shut, Sigmar did a massive purge, and they endured that just like everybody else did too, right? The purges, the persecution, the scrutiny, they had to eliminate any possibility of chaos from Azyr to keep it secure. Not to mention some of those old world grudges, we'll call them fantasy racial tensions, between elves and dwarves, that kind of stuff, all existed still. But when the dust settled, and Sigmar went to go work on the Stormcast Eternals, he left plans within plans that were set up to retake the realms. And when I say plans within plans, they are generations in the making. And the Duardin of this new power, these Cities of Sigmar, would help them in reclaiming the realms. So what did the dwarves, the Duardin, bring to the table? Well, they offered, obviously, mining labor services. Now we need to mine Azyr dry to make weapons and preparations for generations to fully equip and arm a unstoppable army. They blueprinted, designed, standardized architecture for rapid development and deployment, and they offered advanced training in artillery warfare. And on that note, these early dwarves were the founders of the Ironweld Arsenal, which nowadays does have other, it has humans and elves and stuff in it, but it's still dominated by Duardin. And that Ironweld arsenal is an entire pillar of the cities of Sigmar. It's kind of what gives them their edge. It's the handling, the manufacturing of weapons and black powder. Basically anything that's non-carriage and overlord but still slightly techy, it's probably these guys. Gyrocopters, steam tanks, etc. And you have to remember on that note, since I brought up the carriage and overlords, at least at this point in the story, these plans and designs were being made out in total isolation from the carriage and overlords. Which is, to me, is interesting because, like, their tech trees, if you're equating this to, like, Civ games or something, went in two wildly different directions. Where the KO centered on the core designs around flight and the uses of a single material, ether gold, these Duardin centered it around tight formations for warfare using overwhelming firepower. The maneuverability and the way to stay safe was totally different. Their advantages and disadvantages were very different. And so that being said, let's move into the Dispossessed Clans as fighters as we know them today, right? That's their origins. They had to work together to reclaim their holds and lend their skills to everybody just as the elves did, just as the humans did. Well, the dwarves of this setting, the Duardin, came out of this era with a new title, the Dispossessed Clans, meaning dispossessed to deprive someone of land, property, or other possessions. And while every city of Sigmar will have, like, some measure of dispossessed, likely, and when I say some measure of them, like, they're fully into the society over all these generations. They're integrated into civil and military affairs. That being said, you will see groups of dispossessed march to war together, like units with heraldry based on their ancestral lands lost long ago, just something that unifies them as their own personal heritage. You'll still see all dwarf armies. And really, when a dispossessed clan goes out to war as a singular faction or army, their mission is just vengeance. And the ultimate goal, of course, is reclamation, but they just want to go out and fight something. They'll be sent off to distant lands to go help the elves reclaim a section that they had, with the idea that the elves will then help them, and so on. And this is why you can have just units from various racial factions just pop up in your army. Have humans mixed with elves, mixed with dwarves. They're all lending each other their strengths, their weaknesses, their supports to further the ultimate war effort. Now, as far as the dispossessed army itself, a Warden King will lead his battle party out. He'll be surrounded by his guard of hammerers. Around him, there'll be huge blocks of tightly ranked longbeards, iron breakers. They'll be firing, gouts of flame from iron drakes all around them. And then once the enemy is pinned and engaged, gyro bombers and stuff from above will start dropping bombs on them. And narratively, I love the idea of a full dispossessed clan army. And specifically, I like the idea of it working in tandem with, like, elves. Because think about it this way, right? Let's picture Gairan, Realm of Life. Nurgle goes in there. Nurgle is really used to fighting elves, right? He's really good at driving elves out. He's got the poison, the toxin, all this kind of stuff. And the elves show up to reclaim an ancestral home, and the Nurgle army lines up, and instead of elves, they fight dispossessed. Heavily armored, shooting fire that's clearing out all the Nurgle corruption. Hammers and shields that are just crushing into Blight Kings and Plague Bearers. Artillery bombardments, which we're seeing in the Dawnbringer series, is highly effective against Nurgle. Like, all those things. It's because Nurgle was not expecting that as a challenger. And that's, like, such a fun thing to think about when it comes to reclaiming the realms of... It's not just about who's better for this environment and who has the skill set, but it's also, what is our enemy expecting? And how can we throw a wrench in that? And swapping, lithe archer elves with tanky, chonky boys who march up and just throw fire in your face and shoot you with a huge cannon. Like, it's different. That's the Dark Horse effect right there. And we'll end this video talking about why is it cool. And honestly, I've really kind of tapped into it there at the end. But one of the things that's really brought home with the little lore tidbits that we get in the City of Sigmar books is that while the Dawnbringer Crusades, which is an arm of the Cities of Sigmar, are super focused on expansion, right? More cities, the Duardin in these cultures, the Dispossessed, are really focused on foundations. It's not about going fast. We need to go to this place, we need to build walls. We need to fortify this thing. Like, build something that lasts, and that's like a cultural ideology and skill set that leans in hard in that direction. And that is what I feel like they really bring. Culturally speaking, I like the idea of just having someone on your council or alliance is like, we need to build something that is like a bulwark. Planting 100 cities that all get destroyed is worse than planting 3 cities that last. And quite frankly, I like armies that play as they read. You know, I have mentioned that before. That's my great determining factor for if a battle tome is good. Do you read the lore, which takes up the overwhelming majority of the book? And can you play that with the rules section, which takes up, generally speaking, a somewhat tiny section, barring the Stormcast Eternals book? And these guys nail it. It's a horde army of angry dwarves marching in tight formations, overlapping firepower, big bricks that act as walls or killing machines in alternating fashion. It's exactly what you'd expect after reading it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'd love to know your thoughts on the Dispossessed. Truly, I would like to see them get a little bit more support, just as kind of a side thing. It is very human-centric right now for a faction whose lore is interesting based on how it does have a variety of fantasy races in there. Now we're starting to see stuff like ogres and that kind of thing. Like, it's all wonderful. I just want to see more. Let me know what you would like to see for the Dispossessed down below. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.